Hi, this is Mrs. Carnes, and this video is about word problems today. The problem that we're going to look at for this video is going to be on perimeter of a rectangle. And so the very first thing that we need to remind ourselves of is what a rectangle looks like, and also that we know that there's a length on a rectangle, there's a width on the rectangle. This would also be considered another length, and this would also be considered another width. We find the perimeter by adding all of these four edges together. The lengths of all of these four edges, when added together, will be the perimeter of that rectangle. Let's go ahead and see a problem that involves the perimeter of a rectangle. This problem, we first come to it and we have to first read the problem very carefully. That might mean that we have to read this problem a couple of times to make sense out of it. So let's begin. The length of a rectangle is 3 times its width. If the perimeter of the rectangle is 80 meters, what is the length of the rectangle? So a few things that we probably want to talk about. First of all, I want to know in my brain that we're talking about a rectangle, so I bring that picture back into my mind. I also know that it's going to have a length, and that the length is, I know in math, when we talk about mathematical terms or words, the word is always means equal. And I know that the length, we could label with an L, is 3. We know that that's just the number 3. And we know that the word times means multiplication. It's width, and we could always label that W. So basically, we've taken this information, we know we're talking about a rectangular shape, and we basically have created an equation out of it. We know that the length is equal to 3 times the width. And so that might come in handy. Again, notice that we're just talking about the problem. We really don't know yet what we're really supposed to do. We're looking at all of the words individually and kind of seeing what they mean mathematically. Let's go ahead and continue. It then tells us that the perimeter. Now we just got done talking about perimeter, and we know that the perimeter is adding up all of the edges of whatever shape you're talking about. So this is the perimeter of the rectangle. We know that the perimeter of our rectangle is going to be 80 meters. So if I was to walk around the outside edge of our rectangle, it would add up to a total of 80 meters. And then finally, you want to make sure you know what is the question actually asking us. And so this question is specifically saying, what is the length of the rectangle? So when we are done, we know that we must know what L is. That's the final variable that we're going to need to solve for. All right, let's go ahead and continue with step 2 and see how to approach this problem. Now, step 2 tells us to sketch a picture, and in this case, this is a really good example of a problem where a picture is going to be best to help us. So basically, we know that we're going to have a rectangle. We also know that the length is this side, and the width is this side. We also could label this L for length and this W for width if we wanted to. We also know that the perimeter, which we'll label with a capital P, is going to be equal to 80 meters. So the entire outside 4 edges of our rectangle we know is going to add up to equal 80 meters. And then if we go back to that equation that we looked at here, we know that L was going to be equal, remember that's that word is, equal to 3 times its width. And so we can actually say that these L's can actually be equivalent to 3W. Each of them can be equivalent to 3W. So now that we have our picture sketched out, let's go ahead and see what's the next step. We're actually going to use the math to start solving it. So step 3 says that we must define what the variables are, and then we must write an equation. So as you can see, I've just relabeled what we just got done talking about. We know that L, the length up here, is equal to 3W. We also know that this is going to be W. And we know that our perimeter is going to be 80 meters. Now we certainly could add on the other side that this L is equal to 3W, and this is also the width W. So let's go ahead and take a look. We know that perimeter is equal to adding up all of our outside edges. So in this case, the perimeter would be equal to the length plus the width plus the width. And if you look at it again, that's this length plus this length and this width plus this width. When all added up, we know that that's going to equal our perimeter. So let's kind of start plugging in some things that we know. First of all, we know that our perimeter, P, is going to be equal to 80, so we can make that 80. We also know that our L's, instead of writing the L's, we could actually write them as 3W because they're equivalent to each other. So we're going to make those L's become 3W and a 3W, and we're going to leave the width, the W's, alone. Now what you'll notice that we've done is we've taken an equation that had two different variables and we weren't going to be able to solve it, and we turned it into an equation that had one variable, and that variable was W. So let's go ahead and see what this is going to become now. Step 4 is to actually solve the equation. So you can see the 3W plus 3W plus W plus W is equal to our perimeter of 80. We know by how we solve equations, there are like terms here. 3W and 3W and W add up to be 8W is equal to 80. We also want to get our W by itself. We know by using our inverse operations that we'll divide both sides by 8, and we end up with W equals 10. Now remember, that's the width. That's what the W actually stands for. We actually have to find the length. We were told to find the length of the rectangle. If we go back to our original equation that said L is equal to 3 times W, we can take our W and plug it in for that value. So we now have L is equal to 3 times, instead of W we have 10, and now we know that our length is equal to 30. So we now have a length and a width. Let's go ahead and see if this actually works in our equation. The last step when you solve word problems is to make sure that your answers or your solutions work. So if we know that W, the width, is 10 and L, the length, is 30, we can go ahead and label our picture. This would be 10 meters, this would be 30 meters, this would be another 10 because they're both widths, and this would be another 30. And when we add these up, 30 plus 10 plus 30 plus 10, we know that that equals 80 meters. And so we can say the answer, remember they were looking for the length, so the length of the rectangle that they gave us is equal to 30 meters. And we have now solved the word problem involving perimeter of a rectangle. Go ahead and try some on your own.